Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to be recommending to you a diverse array of sci-fi and fantasy options with a heavy focus on short-form fiction such as novellas. This will be based on the prompts for the TorDotComAthon readathon, and all of the titles I mentioned today will be coming out from the publishing imprint TorDotCom. If you need help building a TBR for TorDotComAthon, this video should help you. Or if you're watching this after the readathon and you're looking for some great diverse sci-fi and fantasy options to fill up your shelves, this video is also for you. If you aren't familiar with what TorDotComAthon is, I will link my announcement video up above, which will give you all of the details you need to know, but it is a week-long bingo board style readathon taking place between April 16th and April 22nd, 2022. Here's the bingo board, and I'm going to give you a bunch of great recommendations of books that you can pick up to fill all of these prompts. The first prompts we're going to look at are under 200 pages and over 200 pages. For the under 200 pages prompt, I'm not going to give you specific titles just because the majority of the books I'll be talking about in this video meet that prompt. Most of the books being published by Tor.com are novellas that are under 200 pages. But if you're looking for something that meets the prompt of being 200 pages or more, I do have some good options for you because not everything that they publish is a novella. If you're looking to meet the prompt of reading a book over 200 pages, one option is The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nhi Vo. This is a very queer retelling of The Great Gatsby from the perspective of Jordan Baker, where Jordan Baker is a Vietnamese immigrant. I really like this. I thought the writing was really beautiful and had this sort of dreamlike quality to it. Not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but if you like The Great Gatsby and this sounds up your alley, maybe give it a try. This book also meets the following prompts: Asian author, person on the cover, LGBT plus author, a retelling, a world with magic, alternate history, and a standalone. Also over 200 pages is Goliath by Toshio Yabuchi. This is literary science fiction told in a nonlinear style that is quite gritty, near-future, apocalyptic Earth, dealing with a lot of hard-hitting topics. It is also one that you need to take your time with and pay close attention to, so maybe not the best choice for a readathon if your goal is to get through a lot of books, but I still wanted to highlight this because I think it is fantastic and among the better books that I've seen published in 2022. This one also meets the following prompts: set in space, at least part of it is set in space, 2022 release, person on the cover, Black author, and a standalone book. Another Tor.com release over 200 pages is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marski. This is an alternate history, fantasy, romance, murder mystery where two gay men fall in love while trying to solve a murder mystery and deal with magic in an alternate version of Edwardian England. I loved this. It was a lot of fun. It's definitely on the steamier side if that is something that appeals to you. A pretty quick read and over 200 pages. This one also meets the prompts for a person on the cover, an LGBT plus author, a non-US author, the author is from the UK, world with magic in a series, there are going to be more books in the series, and alternate history. Very similarly, another book over 200 pages is Witchmark by C.L. Polk. This one is also an alternate history, fantasy romance, plus murder mystery set in Edwardian England. I would say though that this one is stronger on the mystery piece of it, and this one is stronger on the romance piece of it. So while these are similar in some ways, they're also very different in tone. This book also meets the following prompts: person on the cover, LGBT plus author, Black author, non-US author, this author is Canadian, trans or non-binary author, this author is non-binary and uses they/them pronouns, world with magic, in a series, and alternate history. All right, I have two more books over 200 pages to recommend. The first one is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I really love this a lot. This is another one that is definitely a genre blend. It is a sci-fantasy horror novel with a murder mystery. I will say book 2 in the series has way more sci-fi elements than the first one. This one is higher on the fantasy and horror elements, plus it has a central murder mystery. Not everybody's cup of tea. I feel like this is one where you either love it or hate it. Usually you'll know pretty quickly if you're vibing with the main character or not, but I was a huge fan. This one also works for the following prompts: set in space, person on the cover, LGBT plus author, non-US author, this author is from New Zealand and currently lives in the UK, world with magic, in a series, and has horror elements. Lastly is a book that I have not read yet, but it is on my TBR and I am interested in picking it up. This is A History of What Comes Next by Sylvain Neuvel. This is an alternate history sci-fi novel centering women in the early days of rocketry. I've heard mixed reviews, but I'm interested in reading it, and I know there's a second book in the series that's either just out or coming out soon. In addition to being over 200 pages long, this book fits the following prompts: non-US author, this author is Canadian, in a series, and alternate history. Next, since I've already talked about all of these books that have non-US authors, let me round it out by recommending to you a novella by a non-US author if you're looking for something to meet that prompt. This is a book that is going on my own TBR for the readathon. You might try The Black Tides of Heaven by Neon Yang. This is an earlier copy before they changed their name, but this is the first in a series of silk punk novellas from an author who lives in Singapore. This novella and the other novellas in the series also fit the following prompts: Asian author, person on the cover, LGBT plus author, trans or non-binary author, the author is non-binary and uses they them pronouns, world with magic, and in a series. If you're looking to meet the prompt of reading something with an animal on the cover, I have a few suggestions for you. Servant Mage by Kate Elliott is a high fantasy novella that is sort of slice of life in that it's just getting us a short period of time in the main character's life, but in a world that feels fully built out and realized. I hope she writes more in this, honestly, because I think it's really cool, but this does have a dragon on the cover, even though the dragon doesn't play a significant role in the story, which I know some people were a little bit disappointed about. This book also meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, 2022 release, world with magic, and a standalone book. Another option is a book that kind of straddles the line between short story and novella that I really loved. This is called The Devil in America by Kaya Shante Wilson. It has a person transforming into a dog on the cover, so I feel like that can probably count. This is a really interesting little story that does get quite dark, so check content warnings if you need them, but it is set in the post-Civil War American South. It has magical elements to it, it deals with racism, and does get quite dark and violent, so be aware of that, but I really liked this a lot. In addition to having an animal on the cover, it meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, Black author, world with magic, a standalone book, and horror elements. Another option with an animal on the cover is American Hippo by Sarah Gailey. I really love this a lot. It is not maybe everybody's cup of tea, but I thought it was a rollicking good time. This is a bind-up of two novellas and some short stories all set in the same world, set in alternate history America, where a law that in real American history was actually suggested but never got voted into law that imported hippos into America. This imagines what if that actually happened, and it's kind of a take on a Wild West tale, but with queer characters, where a group of people is hired to herd feral hippos down the Mississippi River. I thought this was a really good time. I was definitely a fan. It does have an animal on the cover. In addition, this book is actually over 200 pages. I didn't realize, like, the individual novellas you could read for under 200 pages, but if you read the whole bind-up, it is actually over 200 pages. This also meets the following prompts: from an LGBT plus author, from a trans or non-binary author, Sarah Gailey is non-binary and uses they them pronouns, and alternate history. My final suggestion for a book with an animal on the cover is Empress of Sultan Fortune by Niveau. I have not read this yet. This one might actually be going on my own TBR. I'm excited to pick it up. I've heard really wonderful things about it. This one is being called a feminist take on high fantasy, but I've also heard that it reads kind of like a fable. It has animals on the cover, and in addition, it meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, Asian author, LGBT plus author, world with magic, and in a series. If you're looking to read a 2022 release, I have 3 books that are already published that I can share, but I would recommend you check out Tor.com's website to see what other books they've published, because I know there are definitely more than this. I mentioned earlier Goliath by Toshio Yabuchi. This is a 2022 release. Servant Mage was a 2022 release. Additionally, if you've been keeping up with the series, Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shannon McGuire is also a 2022 release. And I do want to recommend this series because I just absolutely love all of these books. books. Where the Drowned Girls Go is book 7 in the Wayward children's series, a series that begins with Every Heart a Doorway. These all involve portal fantasy, and they're set in a world where doors to other worlds really do exist. Children sometimes go through them, and when they come back, they might have trouble coping. We're introduced to the School for Wayward Children in Every Heart a Doorway, which is where some of these children and teenagers who come back can live if they're having trouble coping with real life. And then the later books in the series sometimes follow individual characters going to other worlds. And one thing that I'll note is that even though there are child characters in the series, this is not a children's series. It is written for adults, and that is the target audience. As with most of Shauna McGuire's work, they're very diverse and handled really well. We have racial diversity, body size diversity, gender and sexual diversity. I really, really love them. Where the Drowned Girls Go was a favorite for me, and this one features a main character who is fat, and it deals with fat phobia, I think, excellently. So if you've been interested in picking up the series, there are plenty to read, and this might be a great time. If you're looking to meet the prompt of reading a book by an Indigenous author, honestly, I wish I had more options to give you, and maybe there are other authors that they've published who are Indigenous, but the only one that I'm really aware of is Stephen Graham Jones. This is going on my TBR. Mapping the Interior is a literary horror novella from Stephen Graham Jones that I hear wonderful things about. Through Tor.com, he has also published Night of the Mannequins. He is a horror author, so if you're looking to meet something with an Indigenous author and something with horror elements, he's a great pick. In addition, this novella meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, person on the cover, and a standalone. You might notice that one of the prompts is to read the group book. The group book is Remote Control by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a science fiction novella that is a piece of African futurism. I'm very excited to read it. And for people asking what they should do if they want to get a blackout on the bingo card but have already read this and don't want to reread it, you are welcome to pick up a different book by Nnedi Okorafor. She's written a bunch of things, and I think you can use that to meet that prompt instead if you have already read Remote Control. Remote Control also meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, person on the cover, LGBT plus author, black author, disabled author, a standalone book, and African futurism. If you're looking to meet the prompt of reading a book by an LGBT plus author, we've already talked about a lot of options, but I want to give you 2 others. First up is A Psalm for the Wild Bill by Becky Chambers. I adore Becky Chambers. She writes this really soft, character-driven version of sci-fi that just feels like a hug. This was just so good. It's the first in a duology set in a post-apocalyptic future where there had been kind of a climate apocalypse, but now things are getting better. Humans are learning how to coexist with the earth in better ways, and it's really, really lovely. The main characters are a tea monk and a robot, and it was really good. On my TBR for the readathon is A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is coming out in July. This is the second book in the duology, and I'm really excited for it. But this is already out, and it also meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, animal on the cover. There's a couple of butterflies. They're kind of small, so you probably can't see them, but there are. Person on the cover, robot on the cover, and part of a series. One other suggestion for an LGBT plus author is Sisters of the Vast Black by Lena Rather. This is another one I haven't read yet, but I really want to because I hear good things, and I think there is a second book in this series as well. It's also great if you're looking for something set in space. It is sci-fi. It says, years ago, old Earth sent forth sisters and brothers into the vast dark of the prodigal colonies, armed with only crucifixes and iron faith. Now the Sisters of the Order of St. Rita are on an interstellar mission of mercy aboard Our Lady of Impossible Constellations, a living, breathing ship that seems determined to develop a will of its own. When the Order receives a distress call from a newly formed colony, the sisters discover that the bodies and souls in their care, and that of the galactic diaspora, are in danger, and not from the void beyond, but from the nascent central governance and the church itself. It sounds really interesting. I am excited to read it, and this does meet some prompts if you're looking for them. In addition to being by an LGBT plus author, this meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, set in space, and part of a series. If you're looking to meet the prompt of reading a book with a robot on the cover, I have a couple of other options for you. Of course, we have to talk about Murderbot because Yes, we love the Murderbot Diaries. These are so much fun, and I actually think a really good introduction to science fiction for people who find it intimidating because they are very character driven and not really difficult to get into. This is a series of novellas plus one novel that follow Murderbot, who is a snarky biological AI who has hacked their governor module. They would love to spend all of their time just streaming their favorite soapy dramas, but unfortunately, humans get in the way of that. So All Systems Red is the first novella in the Murderbot Diaries. They're all fantastic. I am a big fan of them, and so I need to put this on your radar. In addition to having a robot on the cover, this meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, set in space, and part of a series. My other suggestion for a book with a robot on the cover is Hard Reboot by Django Wexler. This is a lot of fun. It's got giant mech robots, even though that's not the central focus of this. The central focus is actually a female-female romance between a young woman academic who has come down to Earth briefly to study things and a woman who works with the mech robots. I really enjoyed this, and in addition to having a robot on the cover, it meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, and a standalone book. If you are looking to meet the prompt of reading a retelling, earlier I mentioned The Chosen and the Beautiful, but you could also try reading A Spindle Splintered by Alexi Harrow. This is a modern feminist take on the Sleeping Beauty story. This is also something that is interrogating ableism. I really liked it and was surprised at how much work this does in not a lot of pages. In addition to being a retelling, this meets the following prompts: under 200 pages, world with magic, and part of a series. If you are looking to meet the prompt of reading a book by a Black author and you need some other options, you could read something else from Nnedi Okorafor, like Binti, for instance. This novella is also set in space, and all of Nnedi Okorafor's work is considered African futurism, so this series of novellas could be a great option. They're a futuristic coming-of-age story where a young woman goes into space to attend a university. You could also pick up something from P. Djeli Clark, like Ring Shout. This novella is alternate history and horror with fantastical elements to it. I really loved it. I think it's amazing. P. Djeli Clark puts a ton of history and a lot of nuance and subtlety into his books, and this was just incredible. It's one where I don't want to say too much because it would spoil it, but the basic premise is it's set in an alternate history version of the 1920s, following a gang of women who are trying to take down KKK members who are actually monsters, not humans. It's really interesting. It's creepy, it's got horror elements, but really good. P. Djeli Clark has a lot of other great options as well, like his Jinn series. These are set in an alternate history version of 1920s Cairo and feature murder mysteries and magic. They're really great. And my final recommendation for a book by a Black author is Riot Baby by Toshio Yabuchi. If Goliath is too much for this readathon, but you want to try something from him, maybe try this. It is another hard-hitting, near-future sci-fi novella that is dealing with racism and problems with the US criminal justice system. So definitely a hard-hitting one, but really, really good, which also meets some prompts. Hi friends, Editing Bethany here. So as I was looking at this, I realized I didn't really talk about reading a book by a disabled author, so let's do that. I did mention that anything you read by Nnedi Okorafor counts for this. Nnedi Okorafor is a disabled author. You could also read something from Seanan McGuire, part of the Wayward Children series that I mentioned, or another option is Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker, aka Seanan McGuire. This is very meta. It's a book mentioned in Middle Game, which is also by Seanan McGuire, so if you've been wanting to read that, now might be the time. But this is one of a couple of novellas mentioned in that book by A. Deborah Baker that's more... It reads more like middle grade, but it's still really fun and fantastical. Or its sequel, Along the Saltwise Sea. You could also try reading Flowers for the Sea by Zin E. Rockland. Do check content warnings on this if you need to, because it's pretty intense and includes a horror take on pregnancy and childbirth. But this would meet prompts for a book by a disabled author, by a Black author, by a trans or non-binary author. This author is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns, as well as an LGBTQ author and a book with horror elements. So that might be a novella to try out. Another one that I haven't actually read is Miranda in Milan by Catherine Catherine Duckett. Catherine Duckett is disabled and is LGBT. This novella reimagines the consequences of Shakespeare's The Tempest. Again, I haven't read it, but it's her debut novella and would definitely fit some of the prompts for the readathon, so maybe give those a try. I ended up talking for so much longer than I thought I was going to, but honestly, there are just so many fantastic options coming out from Tor.com, and I'm barely even scratching the surface. If you want to go do a deep dive, you'll find more than this. This is just like what's on my shelves and books that I love or really want to read. So I hope that helps and gives you lots and lots of options for things to read for the readathon, or just for whenever you decide to pick things up in the future. Now I would love to hear from you. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts or feelings on anything I talked about in this video. And for question of the day, tell me which of these books or other books you're planning to pick up for the readathon if you're joining us. Let me know in the comments down below. If you guys like this video, it does help if you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.